There are plenty of big name utes that dominate the sales charts. I'm talking about the Toyota Hilux, Ford Ranger and Mitsubishi Triton. So what's this bloke all about? It's the LDV T60, a Chinese-made ute that in this particular model's case has an Aussie flavour to it. It's the T60 Trail Rider model, and a bit like your local Chinese restaurant that does both chicken chow mein and lamb chops, the LDV T60 Trail Rider does have an Aussie flavour to it, a locally specified handling and ride tune which has been developed by Walkinshaw, the same guys that have developed HSVs and hot Commodores for years. So, have they perfected the ride and handling of the LDV T60? We'll get to that soon. But first, let's take a look at some of the cosmetic changes that have been made to this special edition model. No, it's not a Holden Colorado, even though the stickers on the tailgate, doors and bonnet do look a little bit like that ute. But there's a lot more to the Trail Rider than just stickers. You get big 19-inch black alloy wheels, a black grille, a black nudge bar, a black sports bar and a rollable hardtop cover for the tray. Now these roll top covers are great when they work, but they can be a little bit fidgety to get used to. And the LDV T60 comes with a tub liner in the tray, which plenty of the other dual cab utes out there, top spec utes I'm talking about, don't get, which is a bit of an advantage. And in auto high spec version as we've got here, the Trail Rider has a payload of 815 kilos, which is better than some of the other top spec dual cab utes out there, but not setting any benchmarks. If you need more payload, you can buy a lower spec version, which will have 1,025 kilos. And unlike some of the other cheap utes out there, there's a rear step bumper, which is a big advantage if you need to get in and out of the tray a lot. Backseat space in the LDV is actually excellent. There's plenty of room back here. The driver's seat is set in my position. I'm about 6 feet tall and I've got heaps of knee room, lots of foot room and lots of headroom. My only real complaint is that the seat is a bit flat and unsupportive, so you do have a bit of a knees up position. But you also get rear seat air vents, which not all dual cab utes get. And there's a flip down armrest with cup holders and bottle holders in the doors, plus map pockets. There's not much to complain about back here. And if you need more storage, you can fold the rear seat down or fold the seat base up for up to 705 litres of additional cargo capacity. All LDV T60 dual cab utes get the benchmark in the segment for screen size. It's a 10-inch multimedia system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But I've got to be honest, I've had a lot of trouble getting Apple CarPlay to work, and I've read lots of owner reviews of this car with the same complaint. So I'm a bit worried about taking my phone out of the car because it might not work again, which is a bit annoying. But there is Bluetooth phone and audio streaming, but if you're using the actual menus in the screen, it can be quite confusing. Along with that big screen, you do get a big camera system, a surround view system with front, rear and side views. Now that's really handy if you're off-road, for example. It's also helpful when you're trying to park. Now, in terms of other general impressions of the cabin, it's quite good, to be honest. There's cup holders between the seats. You've got good sized door storage. The seats are pretty comfortable, both with electric adjustment. The leather isn't the best, but there is a leather lined steering wheel and you even get a digital speedometer. Again, there's not a whole lot to complain about in here. Before we get driving, let's talk about the price. The manual version of the Trail Rider slips in under 40 grand drive away, while the auto is just a bit over 40 grand. It still undercuts many of the mainstreamers, but can it justify the premium over the lower grade versions of the T60? Well, let's find out. Under the bonnet is a very, very audible 2.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel. It's noisy and by class standards, it's underpowered. It's got 110 kilowatts and 360 Newton meters, which is about 40% less torque than some of its stablemates in the ute segment. Does that translate to a less stressed drive experience? In some ways it does. You don't have to rev it too hard to get a good amount of pulling power out of this engine, but you can feel that there is a deficit compared to some of the other utes out there. Maybe like the Holden Colorado. It's got 500 Newton meters with an automatic transmission, and it's, well, a lot peppier than this. For the most part during our test, the engine and transmission have worked pretty well, although we have noticed at lower speeds when you are decelerating, there can be a bit of a shunt in second gear, which isn't ideal. And yeah, it is noisy at higher speeds. But the fuel consumption has been pretty good. We've seen less than 10 litres per 100 Ks, which in the ute segment isn't too bad at all. In the regular T60 range, there are two different suspension tunes. So in the entry-level Pro model, you get a harder suspension setup, which is mainly because you might put more stuff in the tray, where the Luxe version has a slightly softer suspension, which is designed to make a better ride. And this Trail Rider version has a different suspension setup again. Now, we can't really tell you how it compares to the Luxe because we haven't driven it. So I can't tell you what it's like compared to the regular LDV T60, but I drove the LDV T60 Trail Rider the same road and the same loop as a Toyota Hilux and a Ford Ranger, and I can tell you that it isn't quite as good as either of those across the board. But it is probably better than the other Chinese ute that you can buy, the Great Wall Steed, and maybe even the SsangYong Musso, which is from Korea. And I've got to say that it does steer quite similarly to a Holden Colorado, for instance. It isn't perfect. It can be a little bit slow to steer at lower speeds. So when you are parking, you might notice that it takes a bit more effort, but at higher speeds, it's quite controlled and quite predictable. The towing capacity for the T60 is 750 kilos for a non-braked trailer, or 3 tons for a brake trailer, which is not as good as the benchmark utes out there, but most people aren't towing more than 3 tons anyway. If you're curious about safety equipment, it is a Chinese ute after all, you might be surprised to learn that the T60 has plenty of tech. In this model, you get a 360-degree camera, rear parking sensors, blind spot monitoring, and 6 airbags. There's no auto emergency braking yet, but new to the T60 is lane departure warning. So it's better than plenty of its big name rivals like the Isuzu D-Max and Toyota Hilux. Well, it's a ute, so we thought we should chuck a load in it. And our mates here at Agri West Rural CRT in Bomaderry on the south coast have helped us out with 550 kilos of lime. So it should be a good test. Let's see how it goes. So how did it cope with the load? Well, it was pretty good. The suspension settled down a tad at the rear, but unlike some of the other utes out there, there was still a slightly firm edge to the ride over broken surfaces. The four-wheel disc brakes, which were good without a load, were a little less impressive with weight in the tray. The stopping power just wasn't as good as it could have been. So that's everything you need to know about the LDV T60 Trail Rider. Oh, apart from one more thing, they're only building 650 of them. Now, is that going to be a problem for LDV? It could be, but the brand is looking to have the suspension changes of this model rolled out across other models in the range. So it could be a win for consumers, especially if it's at a more affordable price point. Tell us what you think. Would you choose an LDV T60 over one of its competitors? Let us know.